hello, and greetings, the damned. Welcome to Pod Damn America, the goth socialist podcast for... I'm very exhausted. I don't know. Recording this intro the next day after we recorded it because I got very drunk last night. I just wanted to let you know a couple things about the episode today. We've got a great guest, Jamie Peck from the Antifada, a podcast that I highly recommend if you enjoy leftist, socialist, and hey, guess what? Also goth podcasts. I did their show a while back and came to find out I have a lot in common with these guys and I really like them. So highly recommend their show if you like more of this sort of thing. Listen to the episode I did. I had a great time. We did poppers. It was awesome. Also, I just wanted to say I found the outro music I was looking for, the crazy Bauhaus style music, and that'll be at the end of the episode. It'll play us out. It'll be a guy named Mr. Maxwell. Just a second, let me look up where you can find him. You can find this artist on SoundCloud on Bandcamp at Mr. Maxwell 1, I believe. I'll put the link in the episode description. He's got a new EP out and a bunch of older albums. So check it out. I like supporting other artists via this show. It's really cool. Keep sending me your stuff. I'll put it on the show. I don't give a shit. We have to do 2 of these a week. So... anyways, yeah, I don't know. I'm just really excited to do a Halloween couple of episodes for this show because I am one of those basic pumpkin spice bitches. I enjoy this time of the year very much. So we're gonna talk a little bit about this hex thing I went to, this anti-Kavanaugh event, and also just like horror and stuff like that in general. Enjoy.
Lock them into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, 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 not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
Yeah. All right. Greetings, the damned. Welcome to a very spooky edition of Pod Damn America, the goth socialist podcast for mummies that are exhausted because they work too much. Nice. I'm Jake Flores. That was...
Alex Patak. Do we say our own names now? I hate that.
I don't know. Alex Patak. I've also got with me Anders Lee.
Anders Lee here.
Raghav Mehta.
Hey.
And special guest from the Antifada podcast, Jamie Peck. Welcome to the show.
Hello. It's good to be here.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for joining us specifically on the gothest week of the year. Glad we could do a cross pod because I know from doing your show that I think we're both goth socialists. Mm-hmm. We're competing in the same market, I suppose. But
cooperating in the same market.
But I'm a big fan of the show. So you, my weird ass listeners, Motorcycle Cumboy, Reasonable Skin, Mike Gams, go check out the Antifada.
I think if you work in a coffin factory, you should get to own that factory.
True. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we believe in building solidarity with button-down anarchists, well-dressed, groomed anarcho-syndicalists.
Speaking of which, story of this week we'll start off on is one that's kind of went a little viral. It's kind of funny. It's kind of fucked up. Basically, there was a hex cast this week in Bushwick upon Brett Kavanaugh by a bunch of Brooklyn City witches who identify, I think, of probably different to a degree of political tendencies, I would assume. I've been reading about the event a little bit, and there's all these pieces in like the Daily Beast and outlets like that are calling them anti-fascist witches. Which, I mean, sure, I'm sure that a lot of people that were at this event wouldn't disagree with that, but I think that like to assign these sorts of political tendencies to a bunch of different people who just showed up to something that was largely kind of funny and probably a little cathartic is a little bit reductive. I say that because I went to the event and I couldn't get in. I didn't think that it would sell out, but it did because it went kind of viral, right? And so the event sold out really quickly because Catland Books is a pretty small occult shop. It's right here in the neighborhood. I've bought tarot cards for Mr. Cleo and shit there. Pretty cool place. It's owned by some really cool people. In particular, there's a couple that owns it who it was really interesting to see them, sort of corralling everyone and acting as liaisons between the police and all the various people there.
How many people were wearing robes?
Okay, so there weren't a lot of like full-on robes.
How
right?
many judges were there?
There were a lot of just like hipster, crystals types city witch people, and then like the significant other, the guy who I think is part owner of the shop or something. I might be wrong about this, but he was fucking great because he was walking around wearing like a three-piece sort of suit, like with like the vest and everything, and like a pocket watchy sort of thing, and just like slicked hair to the side, and he just looked like it really oddly looked very conservative, but I got what he was doing. He was doing like steampunky sort of shit.
Like in 2010 or 11 when Occupy Wall Street was coming out and Reddit was like, why don't protesters wear suits? That's why. So this guy was doing, but for like the witch protest.
Dress for the job you hate.
So I'll get back to him in a minute because something funny happened with him. But basically, I tried to buy tickets for the event, and I couldn't because somebody made the story into a viral thing. And then what happened is, well, a bunch of people bought tickets and filled up the room, and that's fine, to the point where I couldn't get press passes or anything. But the other thing that happened is I went to the event, and all of these people in the Facebook event page were saying like, hey, I got tickets, can't go, and it turns out I'm going out of town, hit me up, and I'll wire them to you or whatever. And so
I'll send you a graven.
Well, I talked to a few different people because I was just trying to find tickets, and then I noticed immediately, like, they didn't even change their profile photos on Facebook, but they were all people that were just like, Jesus is God and shit. It's like, oh, you didn't buy tickets to this event and then forget to go. You're just trying to scam people openly. If you looked at their like profile pages, they were all living like California and shit, and they were just like open evangelicals, which is weird because, they were just like trying to steal from me.
They're doing a psyop.
Yeah, so I couldn't get in, but I figured I would go hang out outside, and that's where just shit was kind of sort of supposedly going to go down anyway. There was a rumor that Proud Boys were going to show up because there's been these rashes of Proud Boy attacks and shit around New York lately, and they didn't show up. I did run into some like DSA medics and anarcho medics and some people that were there specifically in case the fucking fast showed up, and then a lot of confused journalists. But the main event, I would say, was probably the Christians that showed up. I don't know how common this is up here, but I'm from Texas, where this is just like they just show up to fucking everything that has anything to do with abortion and shit. It's
like
kind of
Stephen Colbert and his wife were there.
Well, they show up with a whole like it's showtime like subway amp thing, and they set up and they jumped on top of this box, and they honestly, as a comic, it was impressive to watch because they each did like 20 minutes off the dome about Jesus just into like a megaphone.
There's a dude in downtown Minneapolis who every day does like 2 hours standing on a literal soapbox with that.
On Half Hennepin? Yeah, I've seen that fucking guy. He rules.
He has a hat that says "Cover your breasts."
Yeah, they're horrible. And it's like the fucking MAGA hat, but it just says "Cover your breasts."
Put those tits away.
It's crazy from a performer's perspective because they're clearly morons and they're maybe mentally ill and they're really wrong. But just as I don't understand how anyone just goes off like that and just does that much material off the top of their head. I guess if you're not trying to get laughs, maybe it's a little bit easier.
It makes them ideal candidates for stand-up comedy.
Yeah.
Well,
they have no shame. Like, comics are always worried that people are going to judge them and laugh at them instead of with them. And these people don't have that impulse.
That's true, because they were getting, I mean, owned like constantly, as you would expect. They showed up to this goth event, and I'm going to read a piece from the article right now, just a little snippet about specifically that. There's an article in the Daily Beast about it. There's a couple other write-ups. None of them are particularly good. I mean, there are people from like InfoWars and shit there.
They like getting owned. They're like piss pigs in that way.
Yeah.
They like to be shamed.
I was in summer. I was when I was in Edinburgh. There was a dude in the town square who was just there to argue with atheists. He would just like for 6 hours a day, just like debate atheists.
The amazing Catholic.
Yeah, these people are fucking losers. Here's the quote from the Daily Beast. The night of the Hex, the atmosphere was tense but not threatening. One woman handed out mini Bibles. A black and yellow sign read, "Jesus is God alone." When another man burst into spontaneous hallelujahs, a hexer retorted, "Hallelujah."
Oh, no.
Guess who that was?
Oh, my God.
That was me.
Steve Hofstad.
Wow. You owned the fuck out of them.
I made it into the Daily Beast. I did it in like a vampire voice. Hallelujah.
Oh, that rules.
That's one cold and broken hallelujah.
But the whole thing was, it was kind of funny for a while, like, because they busted out into Christian rock, as they sort of do at the end of all of their events. They always end in that weird hand-wavy Christian rock. And it all has this weird, cohesive, like adult contemporary melody to it, except one middle-aged woman just busts out this Game of Thrones ass like horn that just goes like in the middle of the songs. And at first I thought it was a joke. I thought it was one of the goth people like fucking up the song, but then I tweeted a picture of it and all these people say, "Oh, that's called a fucking shofar." I think
that's God's horn.
It's something from Judaism. I don't understand any of this shit.
Are Jews also against witches?
Okay.
This is a question I've had for a long time.
I don't know that Jews really care one way or the other about witches, speaking as a member of the tribe myself.
I didn't mean to look right at you when I asked you about that horn, but
You do have to speak for everyone.
I think some Jews might object to witches living in Palestine.
Oh.
Good Lord. Happy Halloween, everyone. So the whole thing kind of winds down, and I think the funniest part of this and the most important part of it is sort of revealed when the question of what these people's motivations really is raised, right? So all these people, these Christian people are getting up on the soapbox, like literally they brought a box and they're yelling. One guy's, used to be a homosexual, I'm a reformed, and it's, kind of funny, kind of sad.
So sad.
And so eventually another guy, just a rando person, probably I would say on our side, shows up and he starts chanting "fuck Brett Kavanaugh," and he doesn't really get his chant off the ground. It's kind of funny because the owners of Catland Books, I think, were trying to just keep anything from breaking out. Like, they didn't really want any chance, or not chance, but like any violence to break out on either side of any of this, right? So it's all kept to a minimum. And this guy starts chanting "fuck Brett Kavanaugh," and he's just doing it alone, like no one's really joining in. And he gets up on the box with the person. He's chanting "fuck Brett Kavanaugh" in his face. And then somebody comes up and whispers in his ear, like, "Could you not fucking do that?" And he gets down. But then the Christian, after all this happens, goes, "I just want to make one thing clear. We're not here on behalf of Brett Kavanaugh.
I've never personally met him.
We're not here on behalf of Trump. This isn't about politics." And we're
I
like,
live in the Vatican. I just came to visit.
What's it about? And they're just like, their answer essentially is just like, witchcraft is real. Like, we're here because you know not what you're playing with. Like, this wasn't even about politics with them, apparently. It was just that they literally were like, we have to do ghost busting right now, or else literal demons will be summoned from the corner of fucking Flushing and Bushwick Avenue.
Oh, dude, do you remember the Rapture in like 2011 where there were all those people who thought they were going to ascend?
Yeah.
And so you could get, it was a great grift if you like, you get hired to water those people's plants while they're in heaven. If you're like a sinner, you can say, yeah, give me $1,000 flat. I'll make sure your fucking dogs are walked and all this shit. Free money.
I have to say, fuck Brett Kavanaugh is a not very chantable sentence.
Yeah.
It's funny when people get so triggered by hipster witches.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of like how much witchcraft means to them. I don't want to throw shade on any like very committed witches, because I am friends with some of them too, being like, you know, a girl occupying a certain social milieu, shall we say, in Brooklyn.
Sure.
But like, it's a trend. Like, most of these people are going to move on to like succulents or something in a few months. So.
Yeah, it's definitely like an Instagram hashtag right now.
They used to be Vine stars. Now they're witches.
Succubus to succulents.
In like, I guess the parallel I'm kind of seeing here is that the church is really funny in that they don't realize they're getting kind of trolled in a lot of ways by Satanists and goths and shit like that. Because if you read about the history of like the Church of Satan in, you know, the 50s and 60s in this country, as founded by like Anton LaVey, it's a joke. The whole point of it is not that it's an actual religion that's like metaphysical where you're like literally worshiping Satan. It's just they were just trolling the church by having quote unquote black masses and sort of like having this social club that has this, you know, this aesthetic that isn't literally predicated on like the afterlife, and if you don't follow these rules you're gonna die. There are people that take it a little bit more seriously and you know, like ascribe to like the hedonistic nature of it. It's just one of those things that it's like a religion. It's there for you to just do whatever you want with. But for a lot of these people, this is largely a joke, and the Christians were like kind of aware of that. It's amazing the logical sort of acrobatics they're able to do to just justify still being up on the soapbox. Like at one point they're like, we know you may think this is a joke, but it's actually real and you're actually playing with the devil who's like coming to get you. It was fucking bananas.
Well, we're all going to owe them a big apology when the hipster witches accidentally summon Satan and he eats us all.
Yeah, and he eats a cronut first because he's in fucking Bushwick or whatever.
Yeah, I remember in a really old interview with that Alkaline Trio guy, Matt Skiba, whoever, and he was like a registered Satanist, and they were like, are you really a Satanist? He's like, nah, I just like getting a rise out of people or whatever.
Oh, they're like fedora atheist bros with
for sure.
slightly better style.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, like, to that point, a lot of the other people that were there that were outside to sort of counter-protest the church were like, I mean, I probably agree with them politically, but also not very cool. Like, it's not very cool to be a grown person who is, like, a quote-unquote atheist. I mean, I am, like, you know, if you ask me what I believed in, that's the answer. But, like, if your thing is, like, yelling at like Jesus freaks, like
right. Cool would be
Ricky Gervais, you're lame.
Yeah,
that's what we're saying.
Yeah, I mean
Ricky Gervais was there.
That's basically the same thing they're doing. If it's like, yeah, this is a joke and you shouldn't take it seriously, then like it's the same thing with atheists. It's like, why you're going out of your way to like, if they want to be religious, like why do you give a shit? You know?
Yeah.
I wish I had the amount of free time those people must have to spend on something like that.
Atheists.
Yeah, like people who spend their time showing up and yelling at Christians.
Yeah.
Like,
oh my God, especially
what do you do for work? Like, how do you have this much leisure time?
Well, you know, GameStop employees, I think.
This is my break.
Something along those lines.
Or you just are Sam Harris and say we're incredibly idiotic things with this sophisticated veneer and get paid millions of dollars a year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There were just a lot of dorks out there. The fuck Brett Kavanaugh guy was making like really bad Gervais jokes the whole time, and it just sort of, you know, nothing really happened. It sort of bubbled out. Something I do want to point out is that in that Daily Beast article I read about it, these people identified a lot of the masked up attendees as Antifa, and no one there from the press had any idea what the fuck was going on. There were all these. There was InfoWars. There was one guy from RT that just got shut down by actually a previous guest on the show. Valencia, I forgot his first name, but this is a guy who just showed up to fuck with Fash if they showed up, and a pundit from RT who's very like fascist sympathetic showed up, and so this guy just screamed at him until he just went across the street, and then he just stood across the street alone, like staring at the event.
Jeff Stein from Vox shows up. Is like, "Do any of you have a media contact?"
It was really lame. But one thing
I'm very scared.
I want to say is that a lot of what people report on was that the dreaded Antifa was there, and just because this is such a small neighborhood and small world, I actually know firsthand that most of the people that were there that were getting screamed at for wearing masks were medics, because I know these medics.
Mm-hmm. One of them was Deadpool.
They were from the same organizations that have been like on this show,
right.
But these old fucks were just like, "Why are you wearing a mask?" At like some person who just showed up there with like first aid shit, and the reason they're wearing masks obviously is because of doxing or whatever.
It'd be cool if the hex did work, and then we all had to kind of get into magic after that. Like, that's just something that's like pragmatic organizing. You have to do is you have to own an owl that you send to people.
Well, I do want to live in like the world that these Christians sort of live in, because they do think magic is real, and that is kind of sweet, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
That would be a great thing for society. We would have to band together and work collectively if there was an actual hex and this shit was coming to fruition.
But anyway, just in summation of like the entire event, you know, it sounded like actually what happened inside of this event, and I'm gonna go to the next one, by the way. Basically, was, you know, actually pretty healthy and cathartic. I mean, they had this ritual that was very anti-Pence, Trump, and Kavanaugh, and a lot of the people during the ritual would go and write the names of their own abusers on this thing, and then they burn it, and then yada yada yada. I don't know, something out of an old ancient tome. But you know, it sounded like it was honestly like probably, you know, cathartic in some way and in some way healthy. And so I think that raises the interesting question of like, what is this shit okay? Like, are we supposed to be, you know, secular people as political revolutionaries? Is it fun? You know, is it okay to have fun? Is it okay to seriously indulge in spirituality or occultism or anything like that? I say that as somebody who jokingly has a goth socialist podcast, you know.
I think it's cool.
I mean, I kind of do too. I kind of don't care. I don't know. What do you think?
You don't want to be the no magic guy. That sucks. It's really boring.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've got a lot of experience with not being a dick to people who believe in this stuff, because a number of my friends are into witchcraft, astrology, tarot, etc.
Hey, take a look at my apartment, man. You don't have to tell me.
Your
like,
plant is dead.
There are witches in Jake's apartment.
I mean,
it's like any religion or spirituality, right? Like, it's a second order thing that's mediated by so many other factors. Or something like Eastern religion, right? You see some people use it as an excuse to be a complete selfish asshole, and some people use it to be better. And like, as long as you're not using your hexes or whatever as a replacement for IRL activities, like, oh, okay, my work here is done. I did something. I can go back to sleep now. I think it's fine. If you're using it to like psych yourself up to go do things in the world, that's fucking great.
yeah.
I can't protest. I'm making 6 straw men out of hair.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I feel the same about it as I oddly kind of do about regular old religion at this point in my life. Like, I used to be an annoying atheist guy when I was younger, and I think like now life is long and weird, and I can kind of see how for some people that sort of shit helps them. I also think that for a lot of people it's completely fucking deranged, and you're these people that show up to events to yell at women for hexing Brett Kavanaugh. But you know, for other people, like, I mean, what, to each his own, I guess. You know, who gives a shit?
Yeah,
I have actually participated in a number of witch circles myself, and I jokingly refer to myself as a secular witch, but that really has some meaning for me. Like, I think the witch is a powerful symbol of female power and resistance, and I don't believe that magic is real, but I do believe in the power of ritual. And I think in a way you're like playing a trick on your own brain, right?
Yeah, that's what it is, right?
Yeah. You're thinking about what you want. You're telling other people. So, you know, there's like some accountability. And then like, you know, sometimes, okay, I guess I could tell you the story of how my good friend roped me and some of our other friends into a witch circle when we were all on acid and mushrooms at Winter Cabin upstate. And we wrote down what we wanted to get rid of on pieces of paper. We all cried. We burned the paper. And for me, it was I needed to quit my shitty fucking job with a horrible asshole boss who sexually harassed me and it was just generally terrible. I needed to quit and go off on my own. And I'd really been putting it off because I didn't know how else I was going to make money. And after that, I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm going to do it now. And a few days later, I quit my fucking job. I ramped up my contributions to The Guardian, and I emailed an agent, a literary agent, whose email I had been sitting on for months. Like something just went off in my brain. It's like, oh, time to actually email that agent now. So I don't think that's magic, but it certainly was good and helpful in my life.
It sounds like main utility is catharsis, right?
Yeah, catharsis, focus, like we spend so much time just like trying to fucking survive that like you don't, it's kind of like therapy. Like it's a space for you to actually like think about what's going on with you and what you really want and how you're gonna fucking do it.
Yeah, It's really weird that I think we have like religions as these things that are kind of vestigial at this point. Like they, for so long in history, served as this structure that just like society needed it to some extent because you didn't have the internet and you didn't have all this other way of communication, so you needed like a thing that you guys all met at in the center of your town every week or whatever, or just a vague sense of community, or whatever the fuck the human mind gets out of these like rituals and things like that. But then as they slowly sort of became obviously fake and something that maybe should fall off and not exist anymore because they're festering and they have all these byproducts like corruption and etc. There's still a weird human need, I think, to do some of this shit that if we live in a really atomized way in like modern 2018 without, then we sort of find ourselves going a little crazy. Like, I think that maybe is how you get a little bit too extremely online, is like you're trying to get whatever the fuck thing church fills in your head, but you're trying to get it from your phone because you're like, I'm talking to everyone I know, right now, which is why, like, oddly, something that keeps you sane, I think, is like going to the same bar with your friends every week or something like that. And that seemed to be what people were getting out of this event in a really ironic way. It was really funny to see both the Christians and the witches both practicing on some level the same thing.
It's like pickup basketball. Yeah,
kind of. Yeah. I don't know.
I think there is something to be said that the left has to do a better job appealing to quote-unquote normies, middle Americans who are people of faith in particular. But where I part ways with some people is that the way to do that is not by trying to suppress or police people who are eccentric or who...
Okay, so that actually I think is a good point, because this is what I always tell people about the dirtbag left, is that there's sort of a parallel here, which is that if you want to build this coalition and you want a revolution that's populist and all this shit, you really need to think about what you're cutting out when you tell people, like, we're not for this or we're not for that or whatever. Like, it's some of these things might seem... Like when you look at people that are of a religion that you don't understand or something like that, if you really want to die on that hill by cutting them out of your movement, you're going to lose that many bodies and that many votes and that, et cetera. Right. And I also think that same thing is true of just like a sense of humor. And I might be speaking as someone who's like well, you know, what the fuck is my religion? I went to a stand-up comedy club once a week for every 10 years, you know, and that's my community and my sense of people. So to me, it seems like it seems very obvious to me that, like, no, these are fine people and they just happen to have this one specific thing.
Yeah, the obstacle to achieving socialism is not somebody writing a blog about incense and anal beads. Like, it's an infrastructural material. There are material obstacles we need to focus on.
Okay, but you are going to read my blog, right?
Yeah, as long as they're not trying to legislate away anyone's human rights based on a religion, I think religious people are perfectly welcome and have to be welcome in any leftist movement. I do think, you know, after the Rev, assuming that happens, we will see a lot less religion. But I don't think it's going to go away completely, because there are some things that socialism cannot do for people. Like, nobody knows for sure what the fuck happens after you die, right? That's a big part of religion, is like dealing with death. Like the sense of community that it brings, like that, I think that's been a weakness in communisms of the past, right? Like, they tried to replace churches in the USSR with like churches to Stalin, and it didn't really work. Like, I guess some people got into it, but like, that's not the kind of communism that I want. Speaking, I think, for everyone sitting around this table.
I definitely don't want to go to Stalin church.
No, but like, I don't know. If you want to think about how spirituality would look after the Rev, like, there are some good things that we could get from hunter-gatherer societies, which were much more egalitarian than anything that's happened since then. And like, if we're going to worship anything, it might as well be the earth and the fellowship of humanity, right? Because once you hold the earth sacred, what do you have to do in order to save the earth? You have to abolish capitalism. So there we go.
Damn.
The most American version of the non-religious church would be, okay, we're taking and radicalizing spaces across America. Where do people meet? Subway sandwiches. You're going in Subway sandwiches on a weekly basis every day. And first you just start talking to a few people, and you just like hand them straws and stuff, and you're like, I like sharing or whatever. And then they come back and they're like, I remember you from last week. And you're like, you ever heard of Vladimir Lenin or whatever? And then you're in there, and now we're having grassroots reach to people.
And Jared is like the fallen angel Loki.
That was so biographical.
That's how he got into Subway sandwiches.
So
just a thought experiment.
That actually, I think, is a good segue into what we should talk about for the next part of this episode, which is that, like, you know, on some level, culturally, we do have, you know, this new modern pop culture version of mythology, which is maybe these fucking dumbass Marvel movies or something like that. But also, on some level, horror movies are great because I don't know how true this is, but there's kind of a kitschy idea, and it's kind of an idea you hear in film theory circles and shit like that, and on Cracked.com and whatever, that horror is supposedly this great litmus test for what the fears of a society are in any political era. So, like, a classic example of this is that there's this big theory that, you know, during the Cold War, there were all these alien movies because that is a placeholder for, you know, the specter of communism, these other people coming over to spread their, you know, evil ways and corrupt American, you know, fucking MAGA society or whatever. There's also Godzilla and stuff like that, all this stuff that has the threat of nuclear fallout, right? And so, like, there's an idea that you can apply that to any generation. By the way, that alien thing, there's a really great episode of Daria about it from the 90s that I watched a while back that does not hold up because the Daria and Jane clearly would have been leftists, but in the episode they're like, "What's going on?"
They were probably at the battle in Seattle. Yeah. Well, I mean, the '90s is actually, I think, a very interesting era to this point because it was kind of between. It was like a very brief period where we didn't have really a set other. You know, like the Russians during the Cold War, that was the enemy.
There's no centralized enemy. Yeah.
And then right before terrorism. So we kind of bounced around for a little bit. It was like the black thugs for a while, and then after Columbine, it was like, you know, scrawny white kids. Like we're looking.
It was Marilyn Manson. That was the enemy. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Your parents.
Yeah.
Don't forget your parents.
It was champagne Satanists, basically. Yeah.
Dad.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is another good example of that. Like, I really enjoyed the episode of Rev Left Radio where they did some Marxist film analysis of Texas Chainsaw Massacre as like a perfect metaphor for all of the capitalist crisis that was happening at that point in time. I started a skeptic and now I believe.
That was the 70s?
74.
74. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I buy it. They were a barbecue selling family or whatever.
The family used to work in a slaughterhouse and then they all got laid off. And the only thing they were good at doing was killing large mammals. And they had to survive somehow. ...
But yeah, he was a butcher. That's right.
And it was like a really good metaphor for like how horrible capitalism is on people and like shit rolls downhill, right? So like they're killing things and the things they kill are killing things. And it's all one great horrible cycle.
And they buried a body in the Bretton Woods, which is right by where Nixon took us off the gold standard. It's all connected.
What?
Sure. Quick aside, in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, which is a terrible movie, my favorite thing about
you were
it...
wrong about that.
We'll talk about it later.
Just chasing Scooby-Doo the whole time.
Is Dennis Hopper stars in it, and after the first murder, the first thing he does is he goes to a chainsaw store to solve the crime, and his solution is to buy 2 chainsaws.
Yeah.
And guess what? He fucking kind of solves it.
Oh, damn.
What's the problem here? I don't understand.
It's just so funny.
Walk to the chainsaw store. That's where you buy the chainsaw.
He puts down like $15 too. It's great.
Follow the money and the sauce.
The second one is like campy and still terrifying at the same time, which like no one knows how to do. It's so good. It's a dumb movie, but it's still pretty fucked up. I'll die on this hill.
It's hard watching you and Raghav butt heads like this. From different tendencies.
I gotta say, I like the Jessica Biel one. I thought that
there's
one was
what's
actually
The reboot?
Yeah, I enjoyed
It's
it.
not bad.
No.
I don't hate it. It's not nearly as good as the original, but yeah.
Incorrect, both of you. So I guess the what I'm trying to get to here is that if we follow this line of logic, an argument can be made that during the Bush years there was this zombie thing. Remember that when like just fucking zombies were everywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So what maybe that has to do with is possibly like 9/11 or something, and this concept of society being shaken a little bit. Your sleepy reality you were living with in suddenly gets a jolt of adrenaline, and you go, oh my god, maybe things aren't always going to be this way. And now
because they're survivalist movies.
Yeah, because they're about an apocalypse, right? So I think the argument there you would make is that, because 9/11 did that to a lot of people's minds and made them wonder, maybe everything isn't going to be okay forever socially. Now the big spooky looming threat is having to survive something huge like that. There was also chemical weapons, the Iraq War, and I don't know, who knows.
Anthrax. Yeah.
I think a lot of the apocalypse lust people feel is misplaced lust for the end of capitalism, although I would say that, wouldn't I?
Well, me. At it again.
What do you know? Well, then it transitioned very smoothly into the rise of the superhero bubble, which coincided with the rise of Barack Obama, who is a supernatural figure to people, and they needed some mythical hero to save them from the horrors of the Bush administration.
Yeah, but also during Obama, and this is the one that I can't figure out, I can't square the circle on this one, sexy vampires. I don't understand what that has to do with like the housing bubble or the ACA or something.
Twilight came out in 2008, right?
Yeah.
So that was already in plan, but it
always
take off.
It seems sick.
Twilight was not sexy vampires.
True
by
Blood
the
was
way.
sexy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Twilight was.
True Blood was over the top.
It might have to do with like the other kind of being a little more acceptable now. Like Obama's this guy who traditionally would be, but now it's like, maybe I'm intrigued.
I kind of think that it's possible that because, like, my take on comedy during Obama was that, like, or really art in general, was that everything turned inward because people felt so like, oh, we just fixed it. It's all done forever. So that, now the story you tell during the Obama years is the story of like you and your coming of age and all this bullshit that now seems insane to try to tell other people is important, but it's something that like for a lot of people who were comfortable and middle class during those years seemed artistic. Like I just remember all these people telling me you got to read Dave Eggers and like David Sedaris and all these personal stories. I'm like, what the fuck is the point of listening to someone talk about growing, but
I am watching Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 right now.
The vampire shit seems cyclical. Like, you had Twilight and True Blood, and then 8 years before that, it was like Buffy. And then and then the late 90s, also with
Charmed.
witches.
Which is coming back.
Charmed. And witches, remember that movie, The Craft?
Oh, yeah.
Remember that shit?
I remember it.
Yeah, and then there's Francis Ford
How dare
Coppola's
you.
Dracula in the early 90s, I think.
Right. No, that's a
and
bad
then Interview with a Vampire. It seems to come every 6 to 7 years.
People are just horny, man.
Yeah, exactly.
But where does this fit in with the president?
so to
They're
bring it up
bloodsuckers.
to the present,
Obama's the first sexy president.
my theory on the
Roughly
present
haze, huh?
is that right now, for some reason, we're experiencing a real wave of really fucking good, really heavy, satanic, paranormal, occult, witch-themed, ghost-themed, hell-themed, artistic horror movies that are really actually jarring and not, campy and scary. They're, really well shot. The Witch, which came out in 2015, so it came out just before Trump, which I think you can't really... So this is, one example of something you can't really ascribe to Trump. But
That's a trailing indicator of other forces that brought us Trump, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? So these things aren't directly related to the people themselves, much like a lot of the shit that people ascribe to Trump in society.
The general climate.
Isn't related to Trump himself. And just to tie that into something else that happened this week, real quick, I want to talk about how Trump had this rally in Houston, my hometown, this week. And he, famously, the story of today is that he just went ahead and said, I'm a nationalist. And I think that's really telling about Trump because it tells you that he doesn't actually know, he's a vessel.
He's a fan of the band The National. That's what he's saying. Yeah.
He's a vessel. A lot of people like to, I think, ascribe a lot of overt racism and white nationalism to his brain, he's sitting somewhere and he's a master puppeteer and he's trying to make all this shit happen, but he's really just an empty shell that all these forces sort of work with, right? So
yeah,
in order to incorrectly prescribe white nationalism to specifically him is to miss the point in the way that Ta-Nehisi Coates kind of said, oh, Trump's the first white nationalist president, right? And not that he's the culminating result. He's just something floating in the river that then gets fucking put in
Trump
that direction.
isn't the white nationalist. The devil is the white nationalist.
He cannot think beyond himself. It seems weird to say he's not sophisticated enough to be a white nationalist, but it's that he's not curious enough to be a white nationalist.
Yeah. Everything he says is something he got from TV.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, he's obviously dim, but his father, Fred Trump, was really into this theory about, it was kind of eugenics. It was not even light eugenics, straight up eugenics. It's some people are better than others, and you're just born a winner and a success person, and not other people are losers, and that's just the way it is. And, you can pretty easily swap in white male for the winners, and that's kind of embedded in his brain. I don't know that he could articulate it.
I mean, clearly Trump hates black people, but he's racist the way Kenny Powers is racist.
Right.
He's just an asshole with a lot of money who can weaponize it from time to time if he's fucking bored enough.
Yeah, so he's he's not the exception. He's just part of the problem. If it wasn't him, it would probably just be someone else who had fallen into that position, right?
Has Trump ever had a specific moment where he talks about jet skis, or are we just assuming he's been on one?
If I was a gambling man, I'd assume.
I would not want to see that photograph.
I would.
Yeah.
He never takes his suit off, though.
Yeah.
Right? Isn't that a thing?
That's
Yeah,
a
I've never
really
seen him in
cool
anything besides
way
his suit.
To drive a jet ski.
The only time he's like a a Super Mario Brothers character in that he always wears the uniform unless he's playing tennis, in which case they put him in the...
yeah.
There are those pictures of him in the full tennis uniform.
Oh, yeah.
Where you can see, like, the lines of his underwear and
Holy shit.
his huge ass.
Yeah, his just like horrible cottage cheese ass just
He-
like going everywhere.
He is Toad.
He
Oh
is
my
Toad,
god.
Yeah, which is why we should probably assume he's ridden a jet ski. You know what I mean?
Don't say that about Toad.
Yeah, dude. Toad's ours. Toad's Antifa.
I can't subscribe to this Toad back and forth. All about
Do you
Waluigi.
think they could make him a horror movie villain? Like, could they successfully make that a scary horror movie, or would it just be too funny?
Trump?
Yeah.
He's like the boss at the end of a video game, if anything. Yeah.
Yeah.
You think he could be like actually get people? Well, he's scary.
Well,
yeah.
I mean, the thing is, they don't. But to draw this back to this whole thematic horror thing, they don't often just make the thing everyone's talking about into the literal villain in the horror movie. There was not like there's a movie where there's like Richard Nixon is killing people with an axe, you know. But they,
Well, I think there should be.
but they, but if they're writing correctly and they're using like archetypes and sort of taking a litmus for what people are having anxiety about
Yeah.
and feeling, then they're gonna get something that's then an allegory for him. So I think that
Sure. I'm just thinking in the vein of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, and like 20, 30 years from now, they have Trump as like Jason or something.
Yeah.
Let's talk thematics, okay? So the popular movies right now, Christian demons, ghosts, okay, what do they have in common? They're waking you up in the middle of the night when you're sleeping. What does everyone want to do right now? They want to sleep because everything sucks. And all you want to do is go to bed, but you can't because every time you do, a broken neck version of yourself hangs over the bed and then abolishes your rights.
Oh hell yeah! Did you watch Haunting of Hill House?
Oh, you know I watched it. I'm on episode 8.
God damn, it's so fucking good. That movie's really interesting.
2 episodes in.
Because it's so for anyone listening, I haven't seen this. There's this Netflix series called The Haunting of Hill House that is maybe I'd say the first well done horror like prestige television series, maybe just yet as of our modern era of television. American Horror Story tends to fall off the rails here and
Oh
there.
my god.
It's so bad.
It's the people's horror story. I am
It's all-
100% behind American Horror
It's just a
Story.
bunch of set pieces. That's all it is.
But The Haunting of Hill House is it's really interesting because it was originally a novel by Shirley Jackson, who wrote the famous short story The Lottery. It's a story that was written in 1959, but it's been rebooted, and it's sort of about this like precocious, like Royal Tenenbaumsy sort of family, honestly, that you know, when they were kids, they lived in this house that their father was trying to flip because he was a real estate guy, and then as the adults, they all sort of figure out, kind of like It style, like, oh my god, why they're being haunted, and they draw it all back to this house or whatever.
It's the subprime mortgage crisis. No.
Hell yeah.
They're haunted by Lloyd Blankenfine.
But I guess I don't know. That one's kind of interesting because it's they're very like upper middle class. They're just sort of dealing with this landmine that's been sort of sleeping underneath them forever. I think. Okay, here's my thing with all these movies right now with the satanic shit and the ghosts and stuff. I think the reason that they're popular right now is because a lot of people deep inside feel about Trump the way you would feel about a house that you kind of knew was haunted the whole time you were living in it, but you went ahead and tried to decide to live in it and get away with it, like it would just go away. Like he's like this tear in reality that caused people to have to reckon with something that they knew all along wasn't true, which is that everything was fucking fine under Obama.
Oh
right?
no, I thought this house was funny, but now it's the president.
That's a take that I've heard on Supernatural or Hereditary as well.
Yeah.
Like you think that these institutions can keep you safe, but they can't, and actually they never could.
And that's the other thing about all these movies right now is that Hereditary, The Witch, there's one more I can't conjure right now.
It follows.
Possibly.
The Conjuring.
Might have been it. But the fucking devil wins in the end of a lot of these movies.
Yeah, he rules you. Devil OP.
It's not like the 90s where someone would come back at the end of the movie and have a shotgun and be like, oh, you know, fucking DMX starts playing and then the whole audience is like, hell yeah, get the, you know.
Yeah, bring that back.
That was my least favorite horror trope in the 90s, where they would be like, I'm going to get this bitch, and then they would just kill Freddy Krueger.
We'll have a perfectly scary movie, then one scene at the end completely changes tone where we kick the devil's ass. That's the film.
Do you think some of it's like people can't comprehend the modern horrors of the world? They have to assign blame to supernatural forces too.
Yeah, sure, I'm up for it. I think that's possible. Well, because I mean, yeah, because the feeling you feel when you're watching Hereditary is like confusion. The same way if you were like, you know, a neolib right now, you're probably like, why do I feel so terrible? Not understanding the material causes of it or whatever. You would need a metaphor for.
That's why ideology is like the Bible. It helps you, it guides you through these terrifying experiences. And then you go to people's houses and you get their demons out, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, lay it down, Slavoj Žižek.
This is probably the broke millennial in me talking, which is all of me. But whenever I see the houses in those scary movies, I'm like, I would totally fucking live there. I don't care if it's haunted.
God.
That house is really nice.
Yeah. That's so much space.
Or it makes you feel better about not owning a house. Definitely,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, you know what? Maybe houses are more trouble than they're worth.
Yeah, that's
I'm
actually
just
a
going to
really.
eat my avocado toast and feel better.
Yeah, ghosts never haunt a studio apartment or
No,
anything.
yeah, they hate rent.
Yeah, they would be stuck.
Yeah.
Pay, man, you know.
Oh, okay. No.
Ooh.
Hail Payman.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a parable for how nothing can stop the march of gentrification, right? Like I've talked to my friends about this. Like, if a poisonous underground oil spill doesn't stop property values from going up in Greenpoint, like, what's gonna do it? Werewolves, fucking zombies running through the streets, like what?
We need Candyman.
Ooh, good point.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. All right. This does bring up a good point. So I've been thinking about this satanic thing a lot, and I think it's in relation to Trump on some level. But I also think that there's also a satanic panic happening that's coming from a lot of these movies. Also have to appeal to the right, like the people that voted Trump or didn't vote or whatever. So on some level, you could say, well, a lot of the satanic shit is just plain old appealing, scaring Christians. I mean, these are the same people that think Pizzagate is real. You know, you could scare them with Hereditary, probably pretty bad. But if we were to write a horror movie that properly scares, you know, another faction, since things are all factioned out now, like neoliberals or even like leftists, what would that look like? I think that, like, if we were to understand the alien thing as being properly a Red Scare tactic against people during the Cold War, since there's this new weird neo-McCarthyism with liberals, they're eventually going to produce something where, like, the enemy is like Putin, you know, like a spooky thing on the other side.
There are people who think that every movie is reactionary. Like, I'm sure the witch community was very angry about the message sent by Hereditary. Spoiler alert. Do you guys care about spoilers?
I don't care.
We've all seen it. I think we've talked about it on the show.
All right. Yeah, because, like, at the end of that movie, you're like, wait, maybe witches are bad. And the witch as well, right?
Yeah. But I don't know that there's ever been a horror movie that, like, conservative commentators have been like, go see this, you know.
That's true. Well, is Gran Torino a horror movie? If you think about it.
It's like from a different it's like in his mind, I think it is. You're watching him experience what he thinks is a horror movie.
He moved into a normal house only to find it was full of Asian people.
Yeah. I don't know if super sub-niche horror works because, like, I mean, I liked The Witch and I thought it was awesome, but, like, I didn't watch it and then go, this is disrespectful to Witch. Like, I was like, no, this is what I want, because I treat occult shit as kind of a little bit of a joke. Like, it's fun, so, like, I want to watch a movie where I'm cheering for the villain, but I suppose that could probably happen. I mean, okay, maybe that's why there isn't horror that's specifically marketed to tiny factions, because the smaller you get, the more humorless you get. You know, like tankies don't have to seem to have a really great time. You know,
In general, now.
But there's a lot of stuff, you know, like RoboCop, which again, not quite a horror movie, but that's, you know, has a very clear perspective, I would say, but it doesn't necessarily resonate that way among everybody who watches it. But it's kind of a pretty Marxist movie.
It's pro robots. It's pro cops.
Well, then there are people who would take a message from the witch like, hey, she's just trying to survive in a man's world. Can you blame her?
She kind of the witches win at the end, and it's not necessarily like a bad thing.
Yeah, like what's the alternative? Living in like horrible Puritan rape society? No, thank you.
Yeah, well, that's. I mean, I know you know a little bit about this, but the witch, the idea of the witch, was kind of generated in large part by the church in the Middle Ages to sort of push patriarchy and capitalism, right? Like that's not something.
Yeah.
There weren't that many self-identified practitioners of witchcraft, or really any, as far as I know. It was just like an invented thing that they did to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them were midwives or healers who helped women have control over their own bodies and their own reproduction. A lot of them were activists, both against feudal oppression and against the beginnings of capitalism, in favor of, you know, keeping community-held lands and things like that. I haven't read the whole book, but Sylvia Federici wrote a really influential text called Caliban and the Witch, Women, the Body, and Primitive Accumulation, and makes a very good case for this the preponderance of witch burnings across Europe to be a way of primitive accumulation via women's bodies, women's reproductive systems, right? Because in the Marxist conception of capitalism, it's not just, it's like, why do some people own shit and some people have to work for them? Is it because the owners just like worked the hardest, or like their ancestors did? No, it's because somewhere along the line at the beginning, someone decided to play by some new rules and do a thing called primitive accumulation, where you take things that aren't yours, like either by expropriating commonly held land or by doing settler colonialism on a new landmass full of people who you can dominate with guns, germs, and steel, or in the case of women's bodies, like the act of reproduction. Because before capitalism, or before agriculture, people tried to limit the number of kids that they had because they were traveling around and they were hunting and gathering. After agriculture, and especially after class society arose, people needed to have more kids because they would increase their production that way, and by that they would generate a surplus. So that's the reason, going back a number of years, why women were first sort of forced into these roles. This is not something that has existed throughout history, and that's a common misconception that people have.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's sick. It's funny thinking of a witch as a specter to promote capitalism, where you just get these like priests going in small circles in towns and be like, you ever notice witches? They just give stuff away. What the fuck's up with that? They're never trading anything. Just keep all the shit for themselves. What are they doing? They're out in their hut. You ever seen my mass?
I like the concept of primitive accumulation. I'm just gonna, next time someone has donuts, I'm just gonna claim primitive accumulation. Just take, like, no, this is actually a very complicated historical thing I'm doing. I have a right to do this. Wow, that is really interesting. I need to check that out. That's fucking mad interesting. I'm reading something right now that is okay. Actually, since I was talking about like fiction that is specifically targeted towards factions and reactionary groups and stuff like that. Reading Ursula K. Le Guin right now.
Oh, hell yeah.
I for the first time reading this book called The Dispossessed, which is her famous one or whatever. But it's really interesting because it's kind of reminds me of like anarchist feminist, like Vonnegut almost.
Yes.
It's like science fiction, and it's, you know, sort of a book that takes place cut up on two different fictional planets that are heavy allegories for, I guess, like capitalism and socialism on some level. Am I getting that right at all? I'm listening to like
it's
style.
like a very realistic imagining of this sort of anarcho-syndicalist society, which runs counter to both capitalism and Soviet communism, right? Because it's very decentralized and there's no ruler.
Yeah.
There's no Stalin.
That's what I really think we got to do is, and I get why, because it's like in a movie or fiction you need conflict, but instead of all the apocalyptic stuff, which is fun, you know, it's like, oh, this is what's going to happen if we keep doing things the way we are. Why don't we make some stuff about how things could be, like the vision? You know, start making.
Well, that seems to be what Ursula K. Le Guin did, and I'm like wondering why had I never heard of this book until recently? And I go, okay, well then maybe it's probably because it's not part of what we're understanding as the monoculture when we talk about all these horror movies and stuff. And that in itself is really interesting because we have monoculture up to a certain extent now, but it seems like it's breaking. Like it seems like movies are kind of over. MoviePass was a last weird flailing attempt at just getting people to go watch movies.
Do AMC MoviePass. Promoting it right now.
AMC MoviePass, go for it.
Please send us money, AMC MoviePass, if you since we're promoting
This
you.
is a podcast of Stubbs members.
But if we're gonna sort of like veer off into this post monoculture world where like all of fucking alt-right people read one thing and then we have our own world, and you know, there's not really like one group of media or one channel that we all subscribe to get our information, then you know, maybe it is more possible to make media that promotes you know, our vision of the world in some way, and that can then compete with, you know, this Fox News bullshit that is the other side of you know, this cultural argument. Maybe we're not going to save the world with like a Marvel superhero or something that appeals to everyone, you know?
Monoculture is totally falling apart, and the way you know that is the only movies anybody wants to make now are remakes, because you can't sell someone on a new idea. You need to be like, remember 1987? Fucking aliens back!
Well, they're also the only...
Your whole family loves you.
They're also the only things that that's like test well. I can't remember the word for this, but when they're trying to sell it to a studio, they go, look, a lot of people are on board with this idea already, as opposed to if you just like wrote a movie.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. People want to make fun of communist art, but like, look at the art that gets made now by the market.
Yeah.
Like, could it possibly be worse than that?
Yeah. Late capitalist art is so like. Imagine if this was like, you know how they have like those, you know, old temples and shit like that, where you'll see like, oh, they painted this entire ceiling to look like this or whatever. If we had that now in America as an artifact for our time, it would just be fucking, you know, not gritty. Gritty's cool, but
Watch the movie The Nun.
The Nun?
The spin-off sequel, the spin-off to Conjuring 2, The Nun, where they capitalize on the monster from Conjuring 2, which was a sequel to a, like, one random successful movie. And they're like, technically, this is a monster we made. We have to see if we can make $1 million off it. And they just, like, put out this manufactured storyline that does not make any sense just to cash in on the fact that this is a brand already.
Yeah.
It's there's a guy in the movie who gets buried alive 30 or 45 minutes in and then just pretends that didn't happen for the rest of the movie. He's just back hunting the nun right away.
We're about an hour. We should probably wrap up here.
Can we talk a little more about Hereditary?
Yes, please.
Oh, that movie scared the fuck out of me.
Yeah, I mean, it's my favorite movie of the year, possibly.
Whoa.
Wow.
You see, you never really hear?
No, I haven't.
It fucking ruled, bro. First Reformed, too. But Hereditary.
Well,
Man, I love movies.
I love movies.
Go ahead.
It seemed like a kind of a feminist film to me. Or maybe it's afraid of feminism, or maybe it's like a little ambiguous.
Well,
I'm
it
not
had
sure.
feminist allegories, I think, in that, like, you know, Toni Collette, part of her character's like conflict is people thinking she's crazy when she's trying to explain to them something that's really happening, which is, you know, indicative.
Or is it?
Right.
Like,
and that's why it's a good horror movie. But I mean, it's obviously a parallel to, like, you know, medical history and, like, you know, assigning women hysteria and shit like that.
Oh yeah. She's terrifying in that movie.
Yeah, she's fucking great.
Yeah, that dinner scene.
And like it's about so many things. I mean, one thing is like the trauma of the family, right? Because we're sold a certain idea of the family and of motherhood as this like saintly, nice, natural duty that women are born to do, right? Because that's something that happened back in Caliban and the witch times when they're trying to naturalize this role of reproductive labor so that women will do it for free and capital can benefit from having next generations and generations of workers to exploit without having to pay for it. Where is it going with this? But yeah, as we all know, not everyone is meant to have kids and not all families are safe or good or healthy. So like,
also, it's sexist that Paimon was covetous of a male body. Why not a female body, Paimon? Yeah, there you go. Why didn't you like being in the girl?
She also didn't even want to have her son.
Yeah.
She was pressured
True.
into it. Yeah.
Yeah, like there are lots and lots of women who've had that experience who really didn't want to have kids or shouldn't have had kids and they did anyway. And that's horrible on so many levels. And like you want to talk about fucking forced social reproduction. What's happening right now? They're taking away our reproductive rights and women are pissed off. There's this like intense flood of anger that hasn't really taken any coherent form yet. Like we've just seen the beginnings of it. So maybe this movie's a reflection of that. I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think of I'm trying to remember the movie because I saw it so long ago. I just remember the dad is like barely in it.
He's very stern and he's not passive, but he is a little mansplaining.
Isn't he British?
Yeah, he's like British for some
The
reason.
male characters are like the flattest stock men that I've seen in a while. Like the son, his whole personality is he's just like a horny teen who wants to smoke pot and get laid.
Yeah.
Although that is a lot of teens, to be fair.
I was gonna say when I watched that movie, I identified with that guy a lot as like I was like, oh, that's what I was like when I
killed my sister.
Damn, I've been a husk.
Yeah, I slammed my face on my desk. I wasn't haunted. I was just bored.
I was extreme.
But like he is a one-dimensional character. But when I was identifying with him, I was like, yeah, I was also probably a I wasn't an interesting person when I was like 15. I just wanted to get stoned all the time, you know.
Fair.
Well, and also interesting, we were talking about haunted houses earlier. Her job was to make little model houses.
Yes, dude. This is all coming back to me now. I thought that was so fucking weird.
Which is the feminine sort of homemaker, literally.
But
I
also
like
control, right? The movie's so much about control.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it in terms of different kinds of control. Like her kind is very like type A and meticulous, where she thinks she can control everything, but actually she has control over nothing. Whereas her mom is this witch, this crazy, scary, satanic witch who's like she's channeling these very elemental forces, and that's a whole different kind of power. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, yes, Debbie, I will menstruate into the ground with you the next time we do a witch circle.
Oh, nice shout out.
Got him.
I haven't done that in a while on the show.
Remember guns?
Yeah, remember we used to do gunshot noises? Yeah, we should wrap it up. Happy Halloween, everyone. Thank you for listening to Pod Damn America and subscribing to The Damned if you choose to do so. I'm going to get a button that I can just go, The Damned. I've got a bonus episode this weekend that's fucking bonkers. I'll put out the teaser right after we record it. But yeah, I don't know. I guess we should plug some shit and get out of here. For me, I've got Yoko on 11/13. What is that? November 13th. Fucking second Tuesday of November. We're doing our live stand-up show again. Me, Claro, Kane, and Ian Fidance at El Cortez in Bushwick. I will pin it to my Twitter page. Other than that, yeah, just listen to all my stuff and check my Twitter. Anybody else got anything to plug?
Oh, I do.
When is this coming out?
Probably tomorrow.
Oh, cool.
Do you want to go first?
I need to look up the information.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna be in. I'm gonna be in California starting tomorrow, Thursday. I'm gonna be in San Francisco and LA, doing some shows. So if you live there, hit me up. I need things to do. Okay. Bye. ACLU official. Follow me on Twitter. ACLU official.
Okay, I'm gonna go now. I made a movie. Please watch it. It's pinned to my Twitter on the top pinned tweet. Okay, at Patak Jokes. It's up there. It took a very long time to make. Please give me gratification for that. What's up?
It's just the tape from The Ring.
It's just the tape from The Ring. It's a spooky episode. I hope we've all had fun. And please
Alex
come watch.
just comes climbing out of your TV. Does a tight 5 minutes.
If you're, I'm looking for stage time anywhere I can get it, people. Please come to my weekly show. We're back at Von Bar on Sundays at 7 p.m. If you live in New York City, go to Von Bar. Bye.
If you're listening to this Wednesday the 24th, you have just a few short hours to get a ticket to my one-man show, Dummy, which will be at Brooklyn Comedy Collective. It's a fun show about the autistic spectrum, how it's a symptom. Autism is a symptom of capitalism. It's a made-up thing like witchcraft, and it has been, if that's an inflammatory statement, I know. If you want to hear more and you want to argue with me about it, please come to the show today, Wednesday, 10/24, 9:30 p.m., $5, Brooklyn Comedy Collective.
I never thought about the angle Anders is a witch.
Our witch is autistic.
Well, that'll be for next
unaddressed,
podcast.
no.
Jamie, got anything to plug?
Yeah, I'm going to be a team player and plug a DSA party in Central Brooklyn.
There you go.
So this weekend, October 27th, that's Saturday, folks, come to the Red Scare, a very Central Brooklyn Halloween party. It's 8 p.m. to 12 a.m. at the Verso Books Loft in Dumbo. Tickets are $15, and that supports the work of Central Brooklyn DSA. Also, listen to my podcast, The Antifada. It's pretty good. I like it. I work pretty hard on it.
Pretty good.
And if you listen to all the episodes of The Antifada and Pod Damn America and you still need something to listen to, you can listen to The Majority Report with Sam Cedar, which is where I work 4 days a week.
Woo!
Both great shows.
Yeah.
I've been on both. I am bragging. That's it. Happy Halloween, you goth socialist fucking weirdos.
Boo.
Stay exhausted. I don't know. I really need a sign-off thing. I'll come up with one a year into this show.
Lock the gates.
Lock the gates.
In a darkened room, no light pierces the leather drapes. Sit 3 men like Macbeth's witches, festooned in matching velvet capes. It's Pop Down America, Pop Down America, Pop Down America, Pop Down America. Shambling through rain-slick alleyways, the damned trudge forward, wielding hammers and sickles, and baying like hounds for the flesh of any wealthy unlucky enough to stumble across their paths. Beating passers-by with books by Kropotkin and Ingalls, demanding a robust analysis of the failing capitalist system by utilizing dialectical materialism and a cornucopia of dick jokes.